All right. Welcome, everybody, to my super exciting talk about getting started with security cameras. They are everywhere, and I get all kinds of questions about them. As Jason mentioned, I really do like security cameras, and we'll kind of get into it. But hopefully you guys can learn something from this talk. And if you've never set up security cameras or you're wanting to get started with security cameras, this is the talk for you, okay? We're going to talk about all the different stuff and kind of how they work and what they can do for you. All right. With that said, my name is Ralph May. Got the couple little socials on there. I do teach a bunch of different classes. Actually, I teach a hacker ops class where we do DevOps for red teams. And then I also teach a physical security class. I'll talk about that at the very end, shameless plug. I've been working at Black Hills now for about 4 years. And yeah, so this is related to doing physical security. There's security cameras there, but this is kind of one of my other fun talks. I have another one on Home Lab, which was another kind of fun talk about stuff that wasn't directly related to security. But yeah, so let's get started. All right. We are going to start off with a story time, okay? And this story is called the Scooder Bandit, okay? So when I first moved to Florida, I got my first house, a very small little house, and I put some security cameras up, right? I had never put them up, and I thought it was very intriguing because you could, you ran these together and you could see your house when you weren't there and stuff. And so I did a bunch of research and I put these cameras up, right? And nothing bad had happened at my house or anything like that. I just wanted to be able to see my house when I wasn't at home, right? And, to see what happened. So it didn't take long for something to happen at my house. And that was the Scooder Bandit, okay? So this is one of these little cameras I set up. And I'm going to go ahead and play the video here, and I'll kind of walk through it. We're going to zoom ahead just a little bit here. You can see this little box in the corner next to the flag. And somebody decided that they were going to steal the box. And this young kid, come to find out, goes back over, doesn't take it, and then finally does grab the not the second time, not good enough. I'm assuming he was pretty scared here, but eventually he does come back and grabs the boxes. Now, what's funny about this story is two things. First, those boxes were college textbooks. So the Scooder Bandit just took some college textbooks, and he didn't know until he got home. He was probably very disappointed. But what was funny about this is that I started reviewing the camera footage, and I come to realize that the Scooder Bandit actually went past my house every morning. And I wondered why. So come to find out, the Scooder Bandit was in elementary school, and the elementary school was nearby. So he was going to class. And I kind of figured all this stuff out later. But the climax of this story was the Scooder Bandit decided to hit me again, okay? And the second time, he didn't get college textbooks, but the second time he went to steal from my front door, I was actually watching the cameras live because this had already happened. And I knew there was a package that day. And so the Scooder Bandit went to take the packages off the doorstep. And immediately I called the local police department, and they showed up and they found the Scooder Bandit, who was down the street. He had no idea that he had been recorded or anything like that. And come to find out, he was an elementary school kid in the area. And yes, the cameras caught him, right? He wrote me an apology letter, and nothing else really happened as far as that goes. But yes, my point of this is that one, it was a funny story because the Scooder Bandit got me. And number two is that you never know when security cameras could come and help you out, right? And over the years, I have some more stories of other times this has happened. I've actually caught license plates of cars, found people stealing guns, other things like that. It's gotten to the point now where a lot of times the local police department will come ask me first just to see if I caught anything on the cameras, especially for license plate stuff. So anyways, that is the Scooder Bandit story. All right. So a quick warning. We're only going to be talking about IP cameras today. That's pretty much the standard now for cameras. And so I'm not going to be talking about any older technology. And no, we're not going to be doing any kind of like history lessons on cameras. But we are going to talk about how they work. I'm not going to be selling or advertising anything as far as camera techs. All the stuff here is just stuff I've either tried, I used, I liked. So there's no like push in a direction because I'm going to get some kickback in any way, shape, or sort. We're going to talk about some China specific hardware. We'll talk about two of the companies that are the largest IP camera manufacturers in the world. So it's kind of a, something that can't be avoided. I'm also not going to talk about every vendor. So if you do have any experience with IP cameras, there are a bunch of kind of vendors out there. And I'm not going to talk about every single one. So if I don't talk about the one you love, you know, don't take it as necessarily a discredit. So, all right. With that said, so here's kind of the quick agenda. We're going to talk about the fundamentals of how security cameras work, kind of get like a general idea of what they do and how they function nowadays. We'll talk about NVRs and what they do and kind of how they fit in the picture here with security cameras. We'll talk about the security of security cameras, like kind of how to secure them. I'll give you guys some quick kind of pro tips on how I take security cameras. We'll talk about doing deployments, you know, kind of some thoughts that you should have when you put out your deployments for security cameras. And then finally, we'll talk about consumer security cameras. So the ones you'd put at your house. I've got some security cameras that enterprises would have, but we will talk about, you know, kind of the cameras that I think are good for your house. And then we'll talk about enterprise stuff and kind of what cameras might work well in an enterprise and kind of why you might use those as opposed to something for consumer, you know, because enterprises tend to have kind of different problems, right? And it's not necessarily because they're solving crimes. It's because, you know, they're also just trying to figure out what's going on inside their organization and have some kind of record of it. So, all right. All right. So let's get into the fundamentals of security cameras. Okay. So here's a quick little diagram I have of an IP camera. And this kind of breaks down the pieces and kind of how they function. Again, not every camera is going to be identical or look identical to this, but functionally they all kind of work the same. So we have our lens, right? And that's what's going to be capturing our video. And we have our camera sensor, which is going to be, you know, processing that video. And then we have the processor behind that, right? A lot of times we'll have a light or an IR sensor. This is to help with nighttime. Having a light or IR sensor helps a lot with that. We'll usually have some kind of storage on there. So the ROM storage is where you're going to store the actual operating system. All these cameras have their own operating system and they operate independently. And then also we'll have a SD card to store data on the camera. Finally, we'll have the power supply to actually power the unit. And then we got to put all of this inside of a case. So usually that's kind of like a waterproof style case. And sometimes cameras can have microphones as well as other accoutrements to cameras. We'll talk about some of the other designs, PTZs, other things like that. But in general, we are going to have a case that has a lens in it, dedicated processor that's going to capture this recording, and then some kind of way to send that off, right? So in the picture here, we also have the Ethernet, and that's going to be for our data when we have a PoE camera, right? So again, this is just like a general gist of how the camera components lay out for an IP camera. All right, if we dive in a little bit deeper, you can see that we have the light from the lens hitting that image sensor. And then there's usually some kind of image processor to enhance or make the video look the way we want it to look. There's some kind of compression processor. So we have to turn that video in sometimes compressed video format. If it was uncompressed, the file size would be huge. So we'll talk about video compression and some of the major video compression formats that are out there. So we'll compress the video, and then we also will take that video into the CPU and maybe possibly putting that to a solid state memory, so storage on the camera. If you have like an SD card is the primary example of that. And then finally, we'll have the Ethernet interface in this kind of process. Typically, most IP cameras nowadays, they include this on a single system on a chip, so SoC, and it will have most of the features already built inside of this, right? So single processor that does all of this in one place. But in general, that's kind of the process flow for the camera components. We're taking the image, we're compressing the image, we're saving it, doing whatever we want to do with it, and then we're going to send it off so I have access to that. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is lens size. Okay, so you'll probably see this if you ever start looking at cameras, and these are the different lens sizes that are out there. Now, there can be different, these are just kind of the most common ones. So the 2.8 millimeter, this really has to do with the field of view of the camera, right? So by changing the lens, you can get a more compressed field of view. So it's kind of like zoom, but not quite. This isn't an optical zoom. This is more of a focal zoom. So what's going to happen is if you look at this 12 millimeter, the camera is going to focus on an object further away, and the amount of pixels will be the same. So hypothetically, if you have a 1080p camera, you'll see higher resolution of something further away because you're focusing on just that. That's the only light that image sensor is receiving because of the lens that's in place, right? Now, as far as deployments go, a lot of people will typically stick with like the 2.8 or the 4 millimeter, so they get a really wide angle view. And what that allows them to do is see more, right? One camera can see further and further. We'll also talk, there are even bigger field of views where you can get into a 180 degrees. Typically that's done with like 2 cameras, or a, we'll also talk about this, is a fisheye lens, which would be like a 380 degrees. So 180 in all directions, right? But a lot of cameras nowadays, they will come with a lens already fixed. So knowing these different sizes and kind of what they do is helpful to know, you know, what you want to look at, right? So typically you would buy the wider field of view, but if you have a certain scenario where you want to focus in on something better, then you might buy one of the higher millimeters to get a more specific point of view. Next thing I want to talk about is video resolution. Okay, so over down there in the bottom here is something called D1, right? And that would be the lowest resolution camera video picture quality. This used to be kind of like a standard 10, 15 years ago with the lower end, cheaper cameras. But we nowadays are seeing most cameras are 1080p and above. Many cameras now are 4K. Now, the benefit of this is not in the cameras, it matters much more than a movie, for example. So I'll just give you an example. If you're watching a 1080p movie on a big screen TV, let's say 50-inch, and then you watch the 4K version, maybe you notice a little bit more, but it doesn't matter that much because guess what? The screen size is the size, and you're not really zooming in on the movie, right? But with security cameras, you might zoom in. So having 4K, more pixels, you should be able to make out objects that are possibly further away, right? This isn't really zoom. It's just more being able to have more pixels, so you're capturing more of that light information, and then you know, compressing it for that video, right? So my point being is the higher the video resolution, usually the more clarity you'll get with the images that you or video that you're receiving. So. Another thing I wanted to note about video resolution is that cameras can be adjusted to use different video resolutions, and many cameras can send out multiple video resolutions at the same time. They can actually encode the video for multiple different resolutions. So, all right, with that in mind, let's talk about video compression. So here are a couple of video compression types out there. We have, our old MJPEG, MPEG 4. These are going in the order of highest compression level. So H.264 would be your probably the most common nowadays video compression, but H.265 has been out for a little while, and it's now pretty common in security cameras. H.265 is used for 4K videos, like think 4K Blu-ray. And then there's also H.265 Smart. IP cameras were first to really adapt H.265, or Havoc is the kind of the other name for this. And the reason why is because these compression algorithms, they can compress higher resolution and less space. And space is where you're going to store all of your video that you're recording, right? So in short, the higher the video compression, the more compressed you can make the videos. And with something like H.265, the more video you can record with the same size hard drive, right? There is a trade-off, and that is computing power. So many of the cameras, the system on a chip will have a dedicated video encoder. And so it is already rated to encode so many streams at different quality formats. Many cameras will allow you to adjust them, but just note the, H.265 and something like the smart codecs or like the AI codecs and stuff, they're all about trying to save space on your hard drive. That's the whole point of them, at the cost of some quality. But finally, when we talk about video compression, we can also talk about bit rate. So this would be how clear the video is. There's obviously diminishing returns. The higher the bit rate, the bigger the file size, right? And then finally, the other thing that's going to affect the file size of your video is, and the kind of like the viewability of it, is going to be frame rate. So that's how many frames per second. Most cameras will go up to 30 or 24, depending if you're a NTSC or PAL, right? So this is Europe versus America, pretty much. Anything over 24 is going to be good enough, and we'll have a very smooth video. But the more frames per second, obviously, the more space it takes up as well. So in short, H.265 is what you want for your cameras if you can, because you can save the most amount of space, especially with your high resolution like 4K. And the bit rate you set will affect the quality. You can play around with it. Obviously, there's diminishing returns when you get into really high bit rates. And then frames per second, I usually keep it at 24 or 30 because I want to be able to see it smooth video when you're playing back, as opposed to something like 10 or 5. All right. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is the processor and transcoding. So most of the processors on IP cameras, they have a custom firmware. They usually have some kind of web interface, and they, most of the time, from an IP camera perspective, they also have some other network services, right? The other thing that's on there is the ISP, or image processor. Sometimes that's a discrete chip to process the video. Sometimes it's on, most of the time nowadays, it's on the SoC, so system on a chip. Additionally, you might have some video encoding engines. This is what's going to be encoding the video with that H.265 or H.264, right, to get that video ready to be saved. And there can be multiple streams. So depending on how powerful the processor is, it can actually encode multiple H.265 streams at the same time. And that is useful for being able to view lower quality streams based on bandwidth. And then finally, there might be an NPU, which is like a neural processing unit. This is kind of gets into the AI stuff, but mostly this can do for object identification and other kinds of like more advanced features in cameras, right? So that's kind of the processor transcoding objects that are on most IP cameras. Here's kind of a diagram of that. We're not going to go into all the little details here, but in short, this is also a diagram that shows a PTZ. So there's a bunch of different things going on, but you're going to take that image, go into an image processor, save it onto maybe SD card, and have that ready for saving in NVR, which we'll get into, right? Or saving directly on the SD card. All right. Another thing I want to talk about with cameras is night vision. All right, so there are really have been historically kind of two different types of night vision. Cameras can't see very well at night, so they came out with this thing called active IR, or just infrared. And what this does is, by converting the camera to black and white, and an infrared light, which you can't see very well, humans can't see very well, you can allow you to see at night just in black and white. Another technique that has recently come up for improving night vision shots, so you don't have to just see in black and white, is some kind of artificial light, right? So some cameras now have a light on them to like create an artificial light source for the camera to capture the image. Some cameras are especially good at low light situations. So they have camera sensors that are really good at picking up on low light. And then finally, the newer kind of way to go through night vision is full color. And what they do is they use a combination of a low light sensor, active lights, to create a full color scene. So here are two pictures. One of them is the regular night vision. You can see the black and white. And the other one is a full color night vision. So you can see that even in a fully dark scenario, or a very dark scenario that would require an IR light, these cameras can produce a color image. So very useful. Another one of the fundamentals is camera zoom. So I talked in the very beginning about the focal length, right? So like the different lenses you can get for a camera and how that will change how much you see. You can also have on a camera optical zoom. And I have a kind of a quick video here. No sound, but this is just kind of showing you some of the power of some of these optical zooms. I believe this is a 36x optical zoom mounted on a PTZ, so you can see objects very far away. And again, this is optically zooming the picture in to pick out these objects. Another option for cameras is something called a varifocal lens. What that does is it has an electronic motor that adjusts the focal length of the camera, so you can have something as wide as 2 millimeters or something as close as 12 millimeters, right? So that allows you to have a single camera that can adjust its focal length electronically without you having to buy a specific camera that has a certain size lens. So, all right. All right, some AI buzzwords here. Another things that cameras do nowadays is face detection, object identification, people counting, heat mapping, automated license plate readers. I have a camera that does automatic license plate readers, people tracking, missing objects, among many other kinds of metadata that comes from the video. Many of these cameras can do this on device, meaning that the processor or the SOC is actually doing the identification on the device using a pre-existing AI model, right? So there's a bunch of those. This is an example of people tracking. It will follow people around, keeping them in focus, right? Cameras could do that automatically. Here's an example of the ALPR. So here's two shots that I kind of pulled off the internet. I have one as well. But you could see in the one at night, what happens with the camera is automatically adjust for the color, and you really can't see the cars at night, but you'll be able to see the plates perfectly. It'll pop off the plates even in dark environments. And then obviously during the day with the right zoom or focus, you can capture plates left and right. The automated part is where the camera actually identifies the vehicle and then reads the plates and make that into some kind of digital format. So think of it just like making a database of make, model, license plate, and then taking that information for everybody. So, all right. Another thing about IP cameras, obviously, is networking. So most of these cameras are powered by PoE. If you haven't played with PoE, in short, you're just going to send 48 volt, pretty much. It's a standard for providing power over Ethernet. There's different PoE standards, meaning that there's like a PoE, PoE plus, PoE plus plus. What that really has to do with just more power. So you can power devices that might require more power than typical PoE. Typical PoE, I think it's only about 5 watts. PoE plus is 15, and then PoE plus plus gets into like the 60s and stuff like that. So some cameras use Wi-Fi. We'll talk about when you shouldn't use that. And then obviously we're just they're IP cameras, right? So TCP/IP is how they're communicating, right? Another thing with IP cameras is ONVIF, or Open Network Video Interface Form. So what this is kind of a standard way for IP cameras to communicate with something like an NVR. And there's different profiles. So profile G talks about edge storage and retrieval. So this is retrieving data from the actual device. Profile M talks about metadata and events for analytics. Profile S is basic video streaming. So this allows your NVR or other devices to communicate on a standard. And then profile T is for advanced video streaming. So advanced video streaming features. There's other profiles inside of ONVIF, but just note that this is really just a standard for how to have a camera compatible with other devices, right? So in short, companies were producing cameras that didn't only work with their products, and this is kind of a way to make them a standard for doing that, right? Speaking of video, most of these cameras are producing a RTSP stream or SRTSP, so secure. And this is a real-time streaming protocol that's going over the network. It obviously supports authentication, and the secure real-time streaming protocol supports encryption. This is encryption in transit, not at rest, so that nobody can necessarily see the video stream over the wire. We'll talk about some mitigating controls here, but in general, only newer cameras support encryption. And you could probably go look on the internet and find all kinds of devices that have real-time streaming protocol sending out over the internet that you can just access that doesn't have encryption, or, excuse me, doesn't have a username and password, or uses a default credential. But in general, that's how it sends that video to your NVR or wherever you want to record it remotely. So some of the extra protocols that some cameras might have is like something like dynamic DNS or SMTP to send notifications via email, Bonjour for this device discovery, multicast. These cameras support using a multicast IP address so that you can lower the amount of traffic on your network. 802.1x if you're going to do authentication over your Ethernet, so you can authenticate the device to make sure it's allowed to be on there, right? If you're using 802.1x in your environment. Additionally, QoS, amongst many other protocols that might be on these IP camera devices. All right, let's talk about camera housings. So in the very first slide, I kind of showed you the guts of a camera. And let's talk about the different cameras that are out there. So there is a bullet camera, a dome, a turret, fisheye, PTZ, and box, okay? These aren't the only ones, but these are the most common ones you would see out there. And so the bullet kind of looks like this. It's kind of looks like a bullet, right? This is a common camera deployment. They all kind of have different, the reason they come in different shapes and sizes is because they can be used in different scenarios that make more sense. The bullet is overall a general, like general use camera. Like it doesn't really have necessarily a great Excel use case. I will say though, you won't see bullet cameras used inside very often because they're kind of big and bulky. The other benefit of a bullet camera is it can have a pretty high zoom, right? The other common one is the Torret, think like gun turret. And this camera style is pretty nice because it is pretty flexible as far as mounting options. You can rotate the lens left or, kind of all the axes. And they are very nice in the sense that you don't need to clean the lens, and they're pretty compact, right? So they don't stick out too much, which leads up to the dome cameras, which are, the reason that they were produced is kind of anti-vandal, right? So people throwing stuff at them. But the only problem I found with dome cameras is outside, the lens gets dirty. You have to clean it eventually. So if it's up high somewhere, it can kind of be annoying. The other big use case for dome is something like a PTZ, even though some of the bigger PTZs don't use a dome enclosure. But yes, so that's another one, pretty popular inside. But yeah. Another camera type, fisheye. So this has to do with obviously the look of the camera, and then the viewing angle. So usually it's 360 degrees. It doesn't have to be. And so this allows you to have one camera that can see kind of a fisheye view of everything, right? Here's your full PTZ. This is a pretty modern example of a PTZ from Hikvision here. And what that does is obviously it'll do full pan, tilt, and zoom. And they mount these on housings, and you can use these to see pretty far away, depending on the make and model. We also have these wide-angle multi-lens cameras. These are becoming more popular. What they do is they take a multiple lenses and they stitch them together. So the goal here is to get like 180 degrees is typically what they're going for. And by adding, let's say in this particular example, 4 cameras, they can stitch all of those, let's say 1080p video feeds together to make it look like one big video. And the quality is very high because we're taking 4 cameras, right? This also, it really helps with the licensing too. If you have like a video recording management solution that requires a license per camera, you can use this because it has 4 lenses and get more bang for your buck. Finally, we have these box cameras. You might see these around still nowadays. What they would actually go is inside of another housing to make them waterproof. All the other cameras I've showed you are all IP67 rated, which is an outdoor waterproofing rating. These are the older cameras that you might see at like a bank sometimes. You know, typically they might only be used inside, and if they were used outside, they had to bring a special box to make them outdoor rated. You don't see these too often anymore. The reason they were popular is because the lens that they would be using in there was very big, and that equated to high quality. So, all right. So those are kind of the fundamentals of the camera. Let's talk about NVRs and VMSs. So you got this camera set up, and you can record data to, let's say, an SD card. A lot of these cameras support an SD card. But let's say you get 2 cameras or 3 cameras or 4 cameras. As you can see, this kind of turns into a scenario where it'd be nice to have a buzzword, single pane of glass, or single place to look at all these cameras, right? And so we are going to talk about a couple different solutions that can help you do just that. All right, so in general, we have 3 different NVR types, a standalone NVR, which I'll show you that. We have software NVRs, which I'll show you a couple different software packages. And then there are cloud NVRs, which are kind of really a hybrid solution. And I will talk a little bit about those. All right, so for the standalone NVR is usually tied to the camera brand. It usually provides PoE because these cameras are typically going to be wired cameras, could typically be powered by PoE. They're dedicated for video. They're a dedicated video recorder, so dedicated device just for recording. They obviously have the storage on there for, they'll have a hard drive to save the video from the cameras. Usually the max cameras, they have different sizes. The max camera support is usually the max ports, right? So typically if it's like a 16 channel NVR, it'll have 16 ports on the back, 16 PoE ports. Usually the license included. So if you buy a 16 channel NVR, it should be able to handle 16 cameras, right? So that's kind of a quick example of a standalone. There's different makes, models, and sizes there, but they are dedicated recording device. We also have software NVRs. So these are a little bit more vendor agnostic. You're going to use that ONVIF standard, and they're going to provide a lot more scaling. Usually there is a per camera recording cost, not always. It's kind of a bring your own storage adventure. So you would have a computer and put a hard drive inside of it and use it as a recording server. They can provide redundancy, right? So redundancy on the storage, redundancy on the NVRs, depending on the features. They can do transcoding as well. So I told you that you get this video stream back. What if that video stream is really high resolution 4K, but you're on a phone or something that doesn't need that? It could transcode the video before it sends it to your device to help with bandwidth. And usually software can have better, or the software solutions can have better software. I know it seems weird to say, but they have a more active stake in making software that is more user-friendly and has more features because they're not just selling you cameras. So I wanted to talk about just a couple of them that are out there that I've used before that are pretty popular. Milestone makes a NVR. It's a very popular software solution. It's also enterprise ready, so you can use this in very big environments. Some downsides, it's Windows only, so these deployments require you to run it on a Windows server or just a Windows computer. They do offer a free 8-camera license if you're going to do something like home, but once you get into anything above that, or enterprise, the prices can get really high. It's usually a per camera license, and they can start anywhere from $100 and keep going up depending on all the enterprise features that you have. And they have a nice mobile app. So this is one central place for you to view all your cameras and integrate with maybe like an enterprise solution. All right, Blue Iris is another piece of software that I've used before. This is pretty powerful for home business NVR. It's not really enterprise ready. It is Windows only, but it is a really great value at $80. I believe that's up to 64 cameras for $80. It's a one-time fee. And the mobile app is pretty decent. This is probably your best bang for your buck if you want to build your own NVR. It'll work with tons of different cameras out there. And the link for Blue Iris. I've kind of played around with all the NVRs, but as far as bang for your buck, this is the best. It doesn't mean it's the best NVR, just for $80 for 64 cameras, you're not going to get that anywhere else. So finally, DWSpectrum or NX Wtiness. And what this is another NVR. This is one that I currently use. It's not as cheap, but it is very powerful. It is enterprise ready, so it includes failover, all this other fun stuff that you might want to use if you are deploying it in a business. It runs on Windows, Linux, Mac, and it supports ARM, so you can use like a Raspberry Pi as the recording device if you want. There's a one-time license. It's $80 a camera, and there isn't like different tiers. In Milestone, there's different tiers. Like the enterprise license per camera is more expensive than the regular, like, you know, Milestone Plus license. It's a great multiple OS platform, so the recording device can run as a server, and they have clients for all the different OSs. They have a decent mobile app. So this is another really decent NVR if you want to kind of roll your own solution. All right, and then finally we got cloud. So this is on-device NVR, and what these cameras do, Verkada and Rhombus, they make a cloud-based camera. So there's no real NVR. What happens really is it's the same camera that I've described, except for they have a online webhook and they put the solid state storage right on the camera. So what happens is you access this web interface that you subscribe to, and then you get the feeds from all of these cameras that feed into that. And then you can look back in the recordings. When you look back at the recordings, you're actually looking at recordings on the device itself, right? There's kind of a cloud solution. It's extremely scalable. It has low management costs because you don't have like an NVR, and you know you could just keep adding cameras. So yes, this is your cloud solution out there. Typically, it does have a higher cost. It just depends on your scenario and what you need. All right. So those are some of the NVRs, kind of some solutions. But let's talk about securities. So with IP cameras, some of the best practices that I've done is isolating your cameras. So they should be on an isolated network or VLAN. This pretty much goes straight off the board. If you're going to roll out any IP camera solution, you should put that on an isolated network. If you can, use secure RTSP, or so real-time streaming protocol. I usually disable all internet access for my cameras. So if they're using, so I'm using a Chinese camera, whatever camera, they can't even talk to the internet anyways, okay? They can talk to my NVR, but that's as far as it goes, okay? Use unique device passwords. Okay, so when you set up these devices, though, most of the newer ones now will make you set a new password, but using unique device passwords help. If you want to use all the same password, just make it pretty random, you know, use a decent password. Keep them updated if you can. Depending on the vendor make, it might be harder to get the updated firmware, but if you can, keep them updated. Use video encryption. If your NVR supports video encryption, typically the cameras themselves don't encrypt the video because that would be another, feature or processing in the camera. But some of the NVRs do, like I know DW supports video encryption. So when the video is saved, it gets encrypted. That is pretty useful. And then for remote access, try to use a VPN. There are some other ways to access your cameras remotely, but using a VPN to access your NVR is a great way to pretty much cut it out where, you know, no one from the internet necessarily is going to get access to your NVR, right? So yeah. Big thing here, isolate your cameras. They should be on their own separate VLAN. And do they need internet access? The answer is no, they don't. They do not need internet access for anything. The only thing they need access to is for accessing the NVR, right? Now, in the cloud versions, of cameras, they are going to have internet access. You could make it where they can only access the, with some firewall rules, you could simply make it where it only accesses the provider that you're using. But that is kind of one of the things with cloud. All right. So we've kind of talked about cameras. We talked a little bit about NVRs, kind of the different solutions that are out there, a little security. Let's talk about deployment. So here's some of my recommendations. First, decide what you care about, okay? What are you trying to capture? What things do you want to be able to see? What things are you worried about, right? Everyone's going to have different things they care about, depending on whether it's a business or at your house or wherever. So decide what you want to see, okay? Pick the cameras and placements. So once you decide what you want to cover, pick cameras that work best for that. There's some cameras that can cover, like those 180 cameras are great because you don't have to put up one camera and you can see a ton of things. So, and then pick where you kind of want to place them inside of wherever it is, a home or a business. Create a simple map of where you want the cameras. This does not have to be complex. You could use Google Earth or Google Maps, excuse me, to do this. You could set up where you think the best places to be able to capture everything. Test out the cameras. So buy one example of the camera, make sure it works how you think it's going to work, and it's going to work in the software before you get like 8 or 9 of them, right? Pick the features that matter to you. Different cameras have different features. Maybe, depending on your budget, maybe you want color at night, maybe you don't, or maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe you want a 4K camera up front, but probably don't need 4K on the side of your house where no one ever goes. So, deciding that is really useful. Plan how you want to run the wires for your setup and how that's going to work. Are you going to pay someone to do it? Are you going to run the wires? Running Ethernet wires is pretty easy, but just make a plan and then kind of create your cost estimate based off of those things, right? So those are some kind of pro tips for, your deployments, right? All right, let's get into some recommendations. All right, so for consumer cameras or deployments, number one, avoid subscriptions. Okay. Anything that asks for a subscription, you don't want it. Okay. So Ring, Arlo, Google, Amazon. If you have one, this isn't a personal attack. It's just the subscriptions add up eventually, and they're not typically worth it in my mind. Okay. The other thing you want to avoid is cloud recording, because this is a continuous subscription and it's going to eat up your internet, because now you got to send all this video, or whatever back to a cloud recording. Then also security, so on and so forth. Right. Wi-Fi cameras, not my favorite at all either. They don't really scale well because of the limited bandwidth and Wi-Fi, depending on how many people are around. I do understand why people do them, especially from an inside perspective. Running Ethernet wires becomes totally different. From an outside, I would avoid them at all costs. But yeah, so Wi-Fi, I typically would say inside only. And then battery powered, don't do this, okay? There are certain scenarios where battery power makes sense. I don't know, maybe you're a hunter and you want some, camera to see if someone's eating out of your deer feeder, okay? Obviously, you're not running a power out there. But at home, don't do this, okay? You're going to batteries are going to die. They're going to tell you on the advertisement, it lasts 365 days. I'm like, yeah, if nothing walks in front of it, it lasts 365 days. Typically, you can't record 24/7 if that's something you want to do. And then now you have a new task, right? Replacing batteries, right? Just what you want to do. I have seen people do the solar option. That is an option, but just note that solar typically isn't powerful enough to run these cameras by themselves unless you got a big panel, right? So again, this all comes down to, how it's going to look on your house. Is it going to get wife approved or whatever? So, all right. With that said, here's some of the vendors. These aren't the only vendors out here. Reolink makes a great entry-level setup. All right. Are they perfect? Are they the best? No. But it's not bad, and their bang for the buck is very, very high. I've watched tons and tons of videos. Listen, if you're looking for a cheap option, they're not bad. They include a lot of features like the AI event detection, like human and vehicle. They have PoE and Wi-Fi versions. There's no subscriptions. You can record directly to the device, no extra licensing fees. You can buy them with an NVR, and they also have a doorbell, right? Are these the best cameras in the world? No, but they're pretty decent, okay? They're a good entry for your home, and they can keep the costs low, right? If you don't want to spend a ton of money on cameras, right? Because the price can get very high very quick. All right, the next one I'm going to talk about is Unifi. Unifi is an awesome turnkey solution. Are they the best? No, but they're better than the Reolink, okay? They have AI event detection. The price is pretty decent for the cameras. Are they the cheapest out there? No, but for what they are, they're very good. There's no subscription, no licensing cost, but it does require an NVR. So there's some other things you'll have to buy to kind of set these up. They do have some Wi-Fi ones that work great. And they have a bunch of PoE ones, and they have different designs. They also have a doorbell, which is works very well. So if you're kind of part of the Unifi ecosystem, or you've used Unifi, these cameras are great. And they will get you very far, and they're very turnkey. All right, another one is Hikvision or Dahua. Okay, so these are probably as close to enterprise as you're going to go. They are China, not government approved. Hikvision and Dahua are two of the largest IP camera manufacturers in the world, hands down. And they are inexpensive. Okay, for what they do, they deliver a ton. Now, do they have Chinese IP firmware backdoors? Maybe, right? Maybe, or absolutely. I don't know. Isolate them, turn them off. As far as what they can do as cameras, they do deliver. Okay, AI event detection, PoE, no subscription, no licensing cost. Right, you can use them with or without an NVR. They do have enterprise quality. They can go very high end as far as what these features are. They have a very large camera selection, and it does typically require an NVR to get all the features, right? So they're definitely an option out there. Many other vendors that don't say they're Dahua or Hikvision are rebranded Dahua and Hikvision. Okay, so yes, you can't avoid talking about just because they're from China. All right. That being said, let's talk quickly about enterprise cameras. So I actually like Unifi for enterprise. And the reason why is there's a lot of enterprise scaling features. Do I think they're the best enterprise solution? No. But for the value and the ability to scale these to maybe thousands of cameras, they do function well in that sense, right? They have those features. Again, a lot of the same stuff, no subscription, licensing, you can run the NVR local. They have bigger NVRs for bigger deployments. So they're in like that prosumer, entry enterprise, depending on how big the company is and their budget for these kind of things. So yes, they also integrate with facility access control. So they have some pretty cool stuff. Now, if you want to step it up one more, then we get into the big boys, which are Axis and Pelco. These are serious enterprise cameras, and they are serious enterprise prices, okay? What do I mean by that? Well, so first, the US government approved, NDAA, SCA compliant. These things are compliant, okay? You can put them anywhere. They obviously have all the features of something like a Dahua or Hikvision. They are some of the highest priced cameras that you can get your hands on. So typically, yes, military grade. Typically, a Dahua camera or Hikvision might cost $300, and an Axis will cost $1,100 for the same camera. Okay. They obviously don't have a subscription. These are designed to run to a local NVR. They have their own NVR, but again, the cost can get very high, right? They are great cameras. I've seen reviews where they lay out all of the cheap cameras versus the high-end cameras. But how much better are they? Usually not necessarily worth the price unless you're putting it in a government facility, and you have to have NDAA or SCA compliant cameras. Are they good stuff? Absolutely. Are they high priced? Absolutely. All right. And then finally, another one for enterprises is Verkada or Rhombus. If you want to do the cloud, I know some big companies out there do have these in deployment. The biggest appeal for an enterprise is that there's no NVR. You just keep rolling these things out as long as they have bandwidth. They scale infinitely. Are they that cheap? No, there are definitely cheaper ways to do this, but big companies. Now, I have seen people getting compromised. I believe Tesla's Verkada instance was compromised, and it's very simple. Not that Verkada necessarily had his O-Day or something. Someone got access to the interface because it's online, it's cloud, it's just like AWS, right? So Verkada, it's a pasta. All right. So another thing I wanted to put out here is if you want to dig deeper, there's a couple links here. IP Camera Talk is a great place to find tons of information, way more than you wanted to learn about cameras, how they function, how to set them up, all the deep level stuff. So that's a great place. You could sign up for free. And, you know, there's tons of good information out there, tons of reviews. There's a couple of YouTubes in here. The Wildcat has some really deep level comparisons where you can see all of the different qualities of these like very common prosumer enterprise cameras. The Hookup's got some really great ones too if you want to look at like more of the consumer stuff. He does a really good job of kind of talking about the different versions. So I would check out all those. I've watched a lot of these videos and, you know, kind of digesting all of this stuff. So those are some really good places. But if you start with IP Camera Talk, you will find a lot of information out there to help you decide based on what's available, right? All right. And then finally, I have my shameless plug. So we've been talking about physical security. Me and Travis, we put on a 3-day physical security class. We talk about cameras, not this level of depth, but we also talk about how to do actual physical security assessments. And the CapEx for it is you actually get to break into a live building, which has tons of cameras. Shocker, right? And we have some upcoming dates here. So if you're interested in learning about how to actually do physical security assessments and physical security in general, then you should come check us out, right? And then our final shameless plug is we also have some tools that we have built for helping you do physical security assessments, like the Stealth Reader here, which is a HIDPROX reader that is more like a skimmer for badge cloning. So yeah, we have some pretty cool stuff. With that said, I'm coming right up on time, and that is the end of my slides. Does anyone have any questions?
Ralph,
Hey, Ralph.
you just did the best job, buddy.
Mm.
Well done.
Oh, thanks. I think I just went and spent a bunch of people's money. That's usually what happens when I talk about stuff.
Everyone's like, now I'm really into cameras.
So, thank you, everyone. If you haven't checked in yet for Hack It, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the channel right beneath the webcast live chat and Discord. So if you haven't checked in for Hack It, go ahead and check in now. It's a manual process. Deb and I would take care of it. Currently, while I'm asking these questions, my daughter's practicing the violin upstairs ever so loudly. So I'm having a hard time concentrating on both things. So I'm going to ask one question and then ask the audience if you have any questions. Feel free to ask them now if you didn't get your question answered. What type of storage are we to expect with cameras? How can you assess how much storage and how long you need to procure?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it really depends on the encoding and like the cameras, like the quality, right? So 4K is going to need more space and other things like that. But in general, you know, one camera probably uses like a 1080p camera. It also depends. Are you recording full time or not recording full time? But I would say like a general way to start is I would start with probably about 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes of storage, which isn't that expensive, and then see how many days you get with your deployment. If you have something like 20 cameras, it's going to go pretty quick. But you know, you have something like a smaller like home deployment, like maybe 5 or 6, you're probably going to get about 10 days. So
I have a question. Lion Share keeps asking. We're not ignoring you, buddy. Are there any NVRs for cars?
NVRs for cars? Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No, I think that's like dash cam stuff like that.
Yeah. Let's see.
Do you have any recommendations on pro consumer webcams like Sony?
Webcams or security cameras?
I think it's webcams. So,
so like more camera things.
like if anyone here has any webcam questions, ask Ryan. Ryan is the king of webcams.
I mean, I have some
like $500.
I saw another one. What's a decent amount of money to spend on a system? Well, I guess it depends on how many cameras you have, right? Or how many cameras you want to put out there. So kind of figure out. But I would say that most camera systems anywhere can run from to like a starter setup with all the things you need, probably about $500 to $1,000, and that would get you like 8 cameras, something like that, right? So, you know, yeah. Obviously, there's some variables there, but.
So this is a good question. I also have security cams around my house and things like that. What is the either ethics or the law of pointing those cameras at your neighbors?
I mean, can you look out the window? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that bad? Can you get in trouble for that?
You're not recording them though.
What's up?
You're not recording them though.
No, I think legitimately on your property, you're allowed to record your
Yeah.
property, right? Like as much or, as little as you want of that, right? Now, I would argue though that you could possibly get in trouble if you were just recording your neighbor's like activities or your like focus and they could prove that you were doing something in some malicious way. But in general, I don't think there's any laws or anything to stop you from recording what is from your house.
I have a question. Well, Sensei has a question. Do you use cameras for hotel rooms when you travel? For hotel room monitoring only while I'm away from the room, not 24/7. Battery powered camera, no electricity with Wi-Fi is a must. Any cameras or setups you'd recommend for hotel room monitoring?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess obviously the scenario is like you don't want someone coming in or you want to know if somebody came into the room while you weren't there, right? There obviously are some consumer versions of this. So like kind of all the things I said not to do would be something you would want to do in this scenario. So something that was small, battery powered, something that you could possibly like wasn't like on the table, even though, I mean, that would be a very big deterrent if it was on the table, but someone's gotten into your room at that point, right? But there are some brands out there. I know that I think it was one of the ones I was saying don't go buy for typical. Sorry, I'm looking at the one I had in there. Arlo makes some, and I think Arlo's got one too that's cellular based as well. And they've got a couple different options out there. So they have ones that do have cellular inside them so that you don't even need internet or anything like that. So that might be an option.
Nice.
I got a couple questions here. And we'll probably, can you go like an extra 10 minutes, Ralph?
Yeah. If you got more questions, hit them up.
Yeah. How about we wrap up and then we'll do like rapid fire questions after that. So Ralph, if you were going to sum up everything that you talked about today in one final thought, what would that be?
Don't buy cameras after you think you need them, right? So like, don't buy cameras after somebody steals something out of your car. Get them now so that you could actually see what happened, right? So that's, I guess, my like big takeaway that I learned from doing this. I didn't buy cameras because I was worried. I got them because I was interested, right? And it kind of turned into. The other thing is that the cameras can do a lot nowadays, right? And you can get a lot of decent information, and you can be able to just check on your house anytime, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that something bad's happened or anything like that, but that is nice to have, right? So yeah.
Don't buy gas after you need it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, everyone, we're going to stick around for a couple more minutes and do Q&A, but if you need to leave, we understand. Thank you so much for joining us in Black Hills Information Security Webcast. If you didn't know, we're a pen testing, red team, threat hunt, continuous pen testing, SOC company. So if you have any security requests or needs, you can always reach out to us for that. And now's the time. So if you're going to wait until later in the year to get your annual pen test, now is the time to start talking to our sales team. That's not like a, that's not like a, you got to act now. Like it's, we do book up well in advance. And so if you want to get a pen test from us, now's the time to start the conversation.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you so much for joining us. And all right, that is the end of the webcast. Now we'll do some Q&A for the people sticking around.
So
I like this question.
Go
ahead.
This might be the same one, but someone asked, is this server rack my NVR
Yeah,
to me? And it is actually not my NVR, okay? So the way that I have ended up doing this, and the way I'd recommend everyone do it, is if you are going to run your own NVR, get like a really small mini PC. You can pick one up for maybe $100, $200 tops, okay? And save your video to that device. And the reason why is that it's a dedicated device. And so if something happens to this, or I play around with something, that my cameras don't stop recording, right? So having a dedicated device is pretty useful. And you shouldn't have to spend a crazy amount of money to do that. So.
All right.
You have a recommended place for shopping for cameras or finding deals or sales?
Yeah. So depending on your appetite for Chinese cameras, right? So IP Camera Talk has got like a little store. There's also a another vendor out there who sells a lot of off-branded Dahua cameras. I believe it's called, oh man, this one's going to drive me nuts. I'll get back to you with the link, but there are some places depending on what you're looking for, right? If you've never done security cameras, I think Unifi is a great way to start, right? That it's just like, it's so turnkey and you're not going to like have to learn a lot about security cameras. And you can go right to their store to buy them. I probably wouldn't get, I mean, you could also do it off eBay and other things like that. So, but anyways, I'll see if I can pull up that link for where I typically grab cameras. So
I think what I've learned today, Ralph, is that there's so many questions coming in that you could do an entire 4-hour workshop on cameras.
Oh, yeah. There, I honestly, I at a certain point, I had to move the slides a little bit because I was like, I'm gonna run out of time. I have so much information.
Is there a way to find the spy camera in hotels and other places while traveling?
This is a good question. So, so there's a couple ways. One, you could possibly look for the IR, right? If it has IR at night and stuff like that. So some of those cameras will emit an IR light, right? What's another good way? You could see if there is some kind of wireless, depending on how the camera is set up, right? Depends on your environment. You know, you could look at, what do you call it? Smoke detectors or other common devices, alarm clocks, other things. You could also just unplug a lot of those things if you're worried. There are specialized devices for looking for things that are emitting any kind of signal across different spectrums. So, you know, if a camera was in the room and it wasn't hardwired, then it would have to be communicating in some way. So there's some other ways to do it, but it depends on the scenario.
Keith Papa said hidden cameras will not emit IR.
Some of them do, some of them don't, or don't have anything, especially like a pinhole camera. That would be a perfect example that wouldn't emit IR. Some techniques, spy, tradecraft, whatever, for pinhole cameras is actually making a hole through the wall right on the other side of the room, right? So not in that room, so you don't have to like go in the room and then putting a pinhole camera in there. Yeah, I don't really have any like easy gadgets to grab for looking for them. But
okay.
Bad Horse has a couple questions. Says I notoriously buy cheap cameras. Some of them will work right out of the box at first. After I block them from communicating with China, they just stop working altogether. After factory resetting, they work again until I block the traffic again. Is this a known phenomenon?
I guess it depends on the camera. The Hikvisions and Dahuas that I get, I can block the internet access. They work fine. You know, they're designed to be offline, even if they do have some compromised firmware in them. But some of the other cameras use some kind of cloud provider to communicate, especially with their app, even if they're not storing the video in that cloud, right? So subscription free. So that might be more of what's going on.
Gotcha.
Right?
That makes more sense.
All right, Ralph, I have an assignment for your next class.
Oh, yeah.
Physical pen testing. You send the students in to steal the hard drives from the NVR.
Steal the hard drives from the NVR?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen this movie before, right? They like pull all the hard drives out and like destroy them so that like no one knows that they were there, right? Yeah.
So that leads into my next question, right? Thinking about recording preservation, like what kind of security do you need for your NVR?
Yeah, so typically, you know, you would put it in a lock rack or, you know, some like locked rooms, like something else like that would be hard to get into. I know with my own NVR, I archive videos somewhere else, so you can do that. Obviously, you're not going to catch them immediately. Another thing that's common you'll see with enterprise is what they call edge recording. So what happens is the recording is saved to the camera and to the NVR, and the camera itself, its SD card has like a whole day's worth of footage on there. So even if you destroyed all of that, they would just go to the cameras themselves and then grab the footage from them. So you'd have to rip out every camera.
Well, that's interesting. No, I'll be right back. I have to go destroy a couple cameras.
What I recently just moved, and when we moved in, all of the Ring cameras from the previous owners were all inside the house and had none of them outside. I was like,
So,
what was going on?
Yeah. All right. So I didn't bring this up, but this is a great question. Should I put cameras inside my house? Right. And I will say it depends on the scenario, but note that if somebody were to get access to those, they'd be able to see all inside your house, right?
Yeah.
So I know that I have a couple inside the house, and I mostly have them in the common or the kid areas so that I can see what they're doing without having to like go run over there, right?
Mhm.
But again, it is a risk. It's something to consider it of, right? But you know, how many cameras do you need inside your house? I
There was
mean,
like 6 or 7. It was ridiculous. Now
Yeah.
he was military and was deployed a lot. I could be just to make sure everything was fine, but like had 1 outside camera and then like 7 inside. And I was, okay.
well,
That was
I've
the
got
first thing I
like
did.
9 outside cameras.
Yeah.
Because I don't need 9 outside cameras by any stretch of the imagination,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I do.
I love that you actually have 13, but you said 9, so that way people, when they count 9, and they're like, all right,
I
I
got
found
them
them all.
all.
Oh, yes.
Right.
This is true. I had to deflate the numbers. I didn't want to seem like I was too crazy. I saw one question earlier. Have you caught any gators on your camera? Yes, I have. I have caught in gators. I live near a lake, and there's gators in the backyard sometimes. So it's a tourist Florida thing.
Ralph, I want to go back to the camera in the kids' room. Are
Yeah.
you able to, like, when someone's like, he hit me, do you like go to the footage and like, well,
We've already learned this game. So
Oh,
here's what
no.
happened. So I do have a bunch of cameras inside in like the comment areas, and I actually have these little Unifi ones. They're very small, right, or whatever. So at first that happened with the kids, and you know, my daughter comes crying to me, and she's like, he hit me. And so then I went to my son and I go, did you hit her? And he goes, no, I didn't hit her. He said, hey buddy, I'm gonna check the cameras, and if you hit her, you're gonna be in trouble, right? He's like, I hit her, Dad. I hit her. I didn't mean to, like, you know, whatever. And so we did that a couple times, and now, I mean, it's bad. Like, it'll be like outside, not even anywhere near a camera. I'm like, do I need to look at the cameras?
Oh gosh.
Little true
Fear-
story, but
fear of
yes,
God in them.
yes. So now, yes, I've used that maybe too much.
yeah, yeah, that's gonna need some counseling.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna watch this 10 years from now and be like, oh, that's
No,
I always felt like I was being watched.
Yes. So as my kids get older, those cameras are just gonna go away because they're
Yeah.
gonna serve no purpose anymore.
All right.
okay.
Well, everybody,
Mhm.
we didn't get a chance to get to your questions, but we're going to wrap up for today, and we're going to send all the questions to Ralph and see if Ralph wants to do something with them. Maybe there's a blog post or something, or definitely, Ralph, when you have time, go through the Discord chat, you know, for the last hour and a half and see if there's anything in there that you would like to respond to.
Sure.
If you joined us today, thank you so much for being here. We love sharing our knowledge. It's the way we introduce ourselves. It's the way that we do marketing. So we have no marketing department at Black Hills. If you didn't know that, we killed our marketing department long time ago.
Long time.
We have a content community department. This is the way that we introduce ourselves, and this is the way that we want to get to know you and you to get to know us. And so thank you for showing up today. If you would like to back the graphic novel that we have coming out, The Future Is, the reason why we're creating this is so that we can keep an eye on the future. Ralph, like, I want you to think about the future of cameras and surveillance and things like that, so that way we can incorporate that into the storylines.
Yeah. I want a camera so powerful that I can see all the way around the earth, and then I could go into the future.
So what we picked up on, Ralph, is that since everyone's going to have like a VR, AR glasses,
Sure.
with little cameras in it, it will be constantly scanning people's faces and then like searching who that person is to like let you know if you know them or not, or when's the last time you met them.
Yes.
But you won't be able to go anywhere without like 40,000 surveillance cameras just
They're
showing.
already implementing that in enterprises. So
Mhm.
it's very simple. It is face identification. So when you go to scan a badge to go into a building, they will identify, they already have identified you as a face. And if it's a mismatch between the person who's badging and the face that the camera thinks, create an alert.
Yeah. And we were thinking about making a t-shirt for DEF CON that like scrambles facial recognition. If you can help us with that, giving away t-shirts that scramble facial.
He just gave you a lot of tasks, Ralph. You can
Yes,
say no.
I know. If there's anything Jason's good at, it's just all.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Ralph, thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you.
You have a passion for security cameras, and I love that you love this. So thanks.
Not for spelling or grammar, but definitely for security cameras.
You know, you can fix that and post edit.
No, it was great. They all picked up on it. He was like, "You don't got time to spell." He's like,
Well,
I knew for a fact there was going to be some spelling grammar one in there.
I
Like
love
I
you
even
don't
went
care.
through it and I was like, you know what, whatever.
F it. We
I'll-
don't care. I love it.
well, the way to get a meme to go viral is to throw a slight misspelling in
that's
there.
true.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to correct it, creates engagement. So.
Mhm. Maybe I left them in there.
Maybe you did it
You
on purpose.
Psyops.
Evil genius.
All right, Ryan, kill with fire, sir. It is time. Let's kill it. Kill
Kill
it,
it.
Ryan.
Thanks, everybody.
One
Come
job.
on, Ryan. Let's do it.